In this presentation, we're going to be checking out the new 3D Type tool inside of Maya 2016 Extension 1. We're going to use it to animate several lines of text into this design that we've already started. So let's go ahead and grab that Type tool and begin walking you through a few of the basics. So we'll grab the Type tool and we're just going to kind of scale this word down a little bit so that it fits into the design a little bit better. We'll jump over to our perspective view and we'll begin working with this type. So one of the things that the Type tool does that's really nice is it works very well with multiple lines of type. So if we do something like 3D Type Maya and we jump over to the Text tab, you'll see that we have the ability to adjust the spacing between those lines, the spacing between the words, as well as the spacing between the individual characters. If you want to have very precise control over a given character, you can use the Type Manipulator tool. So that allows you to adjust a given character as well as a given word, or finally you can work at the line level. And this is also the way the animation tools work. You can work at the character level, the word level, or the line level. So with that done, we're going to go ahead and right justify this stuff. We'll grab our translation tool and sort of push this guy over here, and we're going to go and select a font. So all the fonts you have installed in your computer are going to show up. You're going to get a preview of what they actually look like, and you can use the up and down arrow keys to cycle through these guys really quickly if you want to. It's also worth mentioning that in this example, we don't really want italics, so we're going to go ahead and just switch that over to a regular font. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in a couple of the basketball teams that might be in the Final Four. Instead of the Sweet 16, we're going to do the Final Four. So I'm going to copy and paste that information in from an external application. It could be Word. In this example, I'm just using Illustrator because that's where I laid the type out before. And we'll just grab that guy and paste it in here. So we've got 4 teams in our package here that we're going to be animating. So we're going to go ahead and scale this stuff down. And this looks pretty cool. I kind of like it, but you'll notice that it doesn't really have that same arc or bend that this Illustrator file that we brought in earlier using the scalable vector graphics workflow has. And that's because this is being deformed with this bend deformer, this nonlinear deformer. So we want to hook that nonlinear deformer up to our type, and that's really simple to do by just editing the membership of that tool. So if we go ahead and say deformer, edit membership, we can add that object into our selection now and just add all those vertices in there. So now if we look at that guy, you can see obviously it's also hooked up to that bend deformer. Pretty straightforward. Now I might want to just push these guys forward ever so slightly and maybe rise it up a little bit more. That looks pretty good. And I'm actually going to kind of push it back this way also because it looks a little too far off. So now that we've done that, we want to begin animating this type. And this is actually really pretty awesome. This is where the tool really starts to shine. So if we jump over to the animation section and we turn on animate, we can animate any of the translation attributes. So if we just start to spin this around maybe the y-axis here, you can see that we're spinning essentially around the midpoint of each character. We could modify that by adjusting the pivot point of where it's going to spin around. And we can also change whether we're spinning at the character level. We can go spin at the word level. Or obviously, you know, if you start to change where that pivot point is, you're going to get a very different look and feel based on where that pivot point is going to be. So let's just kind of zero that pivot point back to the middle there. 0.5 is sort of around the middle, and we'll switch this back to character here. I'm actually going to kind of give this a little bit of an offset so that when we animate this in, it's going to have a little bit of wave to it, a little bit of rock to it. That looks kind of nice. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to also use this text tool to animate the type coming on. And the reason we're going to use the animation the translations in the actual text tool as opposed to the global transform on the object is because the text tool has this really cool feature for doing a delay on each character built into it. And it's non-destructive. So if you change the type, the delays will just continue to work. It's very, very smart in the way it handles that. So what we want to do is we want to set a couple of keyframes on our position and our rotation and have that kind of wipe on with a little bit of spin and have that delayed text kind of build up over time. So let's go ahead and jump back to our shot camera, our render me camera. And with that done, we're going to kind of scroll through here. And I kind of got too much bend on that guy. Let's get that back to where we were. That's much better. All right. So what we want to do is we want to have this text kind of bleed on here. And around frame 380 or something like that, I definitely don't want that text in yet. Let's actually kind of reposition that guy down the X a little bit further here. So we're going to go into that type tool. And I'm going to say, you know what? At this frame, I want to have this guy pushed way, way back at frame 380. We're going to push this guy back to a value of something like 200. And we're also going to set our spin to be something like a value of 300. And we're just going to go ahead and we're going to keyframe all that information. And then we're going to move forward to frame 400. And by frame 400, we don't want to have any rotation on that guy, and we want to have this all the way in, maybe even minus 10 in. So it's going to come in a little bit further, and we'll keyframe that. Now we have a 50 frame delay on this. So what that means is these characters are going to kind of wipe in, and each one is going to be delayed by 50 frames. So we get this really nice little kind of effect of that type sort of wiping on and building in. And that looks pretty cool. So let's jump over to our perspective mode one more time and kind of see what that looks like. You can see all that type sort of just procedurally kind of wiping on there and looking really nice. Now, if we wanted to modify the function curve for this, that's pretty straightforward to do. We just go ahead and grab that text tool, and you'll notice that it's automatically got an ease in and ease out on there. Now, I'm going to take these curves, and I'm actually going to change their weighting so that they're just straight linear curves. And the reason I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to put a jiggle deformer on top of this, and I want those to have a, kind of just a linear acceleration, and I'm going to let that jiggle deformer handle kind of the ease out. It's going to give us a really nice kind of cool little effect or look to this guy. So we'll jump back to the render camera. We'll kind of frame up on this guy, and we can grab a range here, like right where that type's kind of coming on, so we don't need to see the full range of this. We can kind of start our animation there, and we'll hide those basketball players, and we'll kind of scrub forward in time here. We'll grab this object, and we're going to layer on top of this that jiggle deformer. So we're going to change a few of the default attributes. A jiggle value of something like 0.95 will be pretty good, and we're going to drop the dampening way down and the stiffness way down, and we'll play this back, and you'll see it's going to kind of come in, and it's going to have this kind of cool wavy effect now, and I can adjust that. I can maybe drop the jiggle weight down a little bit further, and we'll kind of see what that looks like the second time through here. Maybe you make it have a little more stiffness, but it gives you this kind of nice layered effect. So what we have here is we've got the text tool, we've got that layered with the nonlinear deformer, and then we've added on top of that this legacy Maya jiggle deformer. So this really shows the power of the 3D type tool when you start bringing in all the different things that Maya has to offer and stacking them on top of each other. Really pretty cool. So the next thing that we want to do is look at a completely different example of how we can do some animation using an external system to drive the text tool. So we'll go ahead and we'll delete everything inside of here. We're going to get a new object in our scene, a new text object. So we'll go ahead and we'll bring up the create type. And for this guy, we're going to go ahead and just drop that intensity down on that shader. It's a little too bright. And we'll go back into this type, and we'll change it from 3D type to something kind of fun. So I don't know, any Unix guys out there, they'll appreciate this. So we've got super user in our scene here. And what we're going to do is we're going to animate this, but instead of setting keyframes on the animation system, we're going to have an external source drive that. So we want to zero out the pivot, or all the objects down to the origin. So if we just drop that kerning scale down to 0, everybody's basically sitting at the origin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up driving these with an in particle system. So let's go ahead and grab our sketch particle tool, and I'll just start dropping down a few particle points. So we'll go SUPERUSER. So we've got our particle system inside of our scene. I'm going to add on top of that a Newton field, and then I'm going to add on top of that a vortex field. So these particles, if we go ahead and we look at the attributes for them, I've got a couple things set up on them. I've got collision set to do some self-colliding. I've got their collision radius kind of cranked up a little bit here. And I've also got rotation value turned on. So it's going to compute that rotation when it collides with each other and when it collides with the ground plane. So we're going to set this back to frame 1. We'll rewind our animation, and we'll put this up to a range of something like 3,000. So now that we've got that all set up, the next thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and hook the particle system up to the type. So we'll grab both the particles and the type. We'll jump into our node editor, and we'll just graph these guys. So the shell deformer is really where all the animation happens inside of the type tool. So we're going to show all the attributes for that shell deformer. And the one that we're really interested in is this translate in PP. So we're going to expand that guy out, and we're going to grab the position of the particles, and we're going to drive that position. So you can see they start to move along for the ride. And we're also going to grab the rotate PP, and we're going to have that drive those guys. So with that done, we can grab our Newton field, which is kind of fun to play around with here. And we'll sort of just go into the interactive playback mode. And those guys are going to try to get to that Newton field. The vortex is going to kind of spin those around a little bit. and as they collide with the ground, they're going to get a little bit of rotation, and when they collide with each other, they're also going to get a little bit of rotation. And here's where the really crazy thing happens. If we go back into this text tool, because it's completely non-destructive, and we start to make changes to it, well, it's just going to work. It's really, really kind of cool. So let's go back to that type tool. Where are you? Right there. So instead of being super user, we'll say super cool. And maybe we'll jump into the geometry section for this guy, and we'll give it an outer bevel. And maybe we'll give that outer bevel, like an extrude offset. It's a little bit higher, something like 2. And maybe give it a little more extrude depth. And maybe we'll just go in here and just add onto that some shaders. So if we rewind this and play it back, you can see that obviously completely non-destructive in nature. Everything that we've done just works. And that's really the power of the new text tool inside of Maya 2016 Extension 1. Thanks for taking the time to check it out.